Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this December 24th, Christmas Eve. Thank you for joining us here for Alaska Weather and trusting us with your weather information all year long. It's been a pleasure to serve you here, and thanks for sticking with us. We encourage you to always find your latest weather information any number of ways. Of course, the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. Click through that as you need. Bookmark the sites that are more useful to you so you don't have to start at the top level every time. And if you can't find what you want any time of the year or even over the holiday weekend, feel free to email me, david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you anytime I can and in any way I can. It's my pleasure to serve you no matter what part of Alaska you're in. Here's a look at the Alaska weather that's a little bit on the hazardous side tonight. We've got some strong gusty winds across the Deltana, Tanana Flats region around Delta. These winds coming up out of the south, about 30-35 miles per hour or so. Through tomorrow afternoon, the winds should stay up in this region. And we also have some stronger gusts around the Eagle area, up around the Yukon River itself. Those gusts, again, will continue about that 30-35 mile an hour range, at least through tomorrow afternoon. So some blustery winds here in the lee of the Alaska Range. Should be expected at least for a little while longer there, and of course Santa knows what he's doing. He'll have no trouble navigating around that. But one thing that is kind of interesting here is the deep inversion that we're finding around the Fairbanks area. If you have been in Fairbanks for any length of time, this is not a new phenomenon for you in the wintertime, but perhaps if you haven't thought about it in a while or you're new to the region, this is what's going on. In the wintertime, a lot of very dense air sinks down to the valley floor, and over time the air gets colder and colder. It really just kind of locks in, just like liquid would in a glass or a bowl. It sinks down to its lowest possible point. Well, warm air is less dense and wants to rise like a hot air balloon, and in this case, when we have warmer air in the region, it doesn't break through this cold dense air down below. But what happens when it's cold? You want to light the fire and you want to burn things, and that creates smoke particulates. You've probably heard this referred to as PM 2.5. That's that smoke particulate that makes such a big difference in air quality. Well, in this case, the inversion quite literally traps those particulates at the lowest part of the valley, and that's where everybody lives. So in this case, when we have a very strong inversion like we've had at least for the last couple days and again today, that very poor air quality gets trapped down where everybody lives and breathes. That's not good. Take a look at this inversion. It's a really strong one. It's about 50 degrees or so the last couple days of a difference there from places like Cleary Summit, well above the Fairbanks floor, to about 12 to 13 below where the valley is a lot lower. Again, pretty steep inversion there, and it's inverted from what we would be considering a normal process where the air would be cooling as you go up in altitude or elevation. Consider climbing a mountain there. You would expect it would be colder on the mountaintop than where you started down below at the trailhead, and that's what we call the difference here. It is inverted or backwards from what you would typically expect, and this is just a result of cold air finding the nooks and crannies in Alaska, and particularly in the Fairbanks and the Middle Tanana Valley region, and the lack of solar heating that's able to start that ground warming up and then creating those rising air bubbles, which then mixes up that inversion and allows all of this to be scrubbed away and easier to breathe on a winter day. So this is why air quality matters and is such a challenge for the Fairbanks region there. You can read more about this anytime by heading to weather.gov/Fairbanks. Read their special statement on that and follow air quality alerts from the links they've provided there on their website. Good stuff. Here's a look at the satellite picture across the region in the west. You can still see this plume of moisture working its way in from the Gulf all the way up through the Bering Strait. And once again, this is impacting the amount of ice in the Chukchi Sea. Wait until you see the pictures here coming up on the marine weather in just a little bit. In the meantime, we've got a low sitting outside the Dixon entrance. That is important because if you're from Sitka to about Ketchikan tonight, there's a fighting chance you're going to have some snow, maybe an inch, inch and a half in some cases. Not a lot, probably be a pretty wet snow. But there is going to be some snow in parts of southeast, and it might just kind of flirt and creep into Juneau, so you might see some flurries or a few flakes there. Maybe, if you're lucky, a little bit more than that, but a little disturbance right here could give you a white Christmas. So here's hoping. Hope you have a good one. Out across the Bristol Bay region, low pressure is still sitting here, really not doing a whole lot, creating some intermittent snow showers across the region all the way through the northwest coastline and out across the chain. There's some periods of snow showers there as well. Here's the loop one more time, and you can see that ridge of high pressure just carving and scrubbing away the clouds across the central and eastern interior all the way into the Yukon. And that's going to continue, and if you look really carefully, you can see some patchy areas of white. They kind of seem to shift around a little bit. That's a lot of that low cloud cover, maybe some fog in some regions, and also a little bit of snow out there across some of the Alaska ranges and hills. So just beautiful picture there from outer space. As we look at today's weather, low pressure sitting across the Bering Strait is about 1,002 millibars, not very low at all. And you can see the other low pressure circulations that are worthy of noting on the map are barely worthy noting by the numbers anyway. The frontal boundary is working across the Bering Sea. This is falling apart. That's why we break it into lines here. We've got another tiny little wave and another one right behind that. These are really minor interruptions, but they are creating wind shifts, temperature shifts, humidity shifts, and rain and snow showers as they pass through there, mostly snow showers at this point, so they're worthy of noting here. Here's that circulation just outside of the Dixon entrance. Didn't see any precipitation on the map last hour. As this is working its way north and east, though, we would expect to see some very light snow developing across the south and western kind of diagonal corner if you wanted to draw a line across the region. That's going to creep inland a little bit more tonight. Across southeast, that means that chance of snow is coming up a little bit there. Again, from Sitka down toward Ketchikan. Don't be surprised. Probably some rain and snow mixed in there together. Some of that's going to try and sneak into Prince William Sound. Snow showers for the west. Rain and snow maybe for Nome tonight. Druid is snow, but there's a chance it's going to mix back and forth. So we'll see. Out across the west, snow showers for the central chain. As we get into Monday, Christmas Day, rain and snow very near southeast. There's a chance for some light snow on the interior. For the Alaska range, watch for snow showers there. Generally cloudy around Anchorage southwest. Light snow possible for the YK Delta all the way up through Nome. And for the Kotzebue Sound region on northwest coast. Otherwise, clear and cold for many across the central and eastern interior. High pressure across the Yukon, settling in at 1,041 millibars. Another high trying to set up across northwestern Alaska. And this ridge is trying to establish itself just in time because there's another low working its way across the western chain. So at least for the mid to latter parts of the week, high pressure, if it can get established, will do one really important thing, and that could be diminish the winds across the Chukchi Sea enough so that we could get some new ice forming in the region where there is not a lot of ice right now. Low pressure across the Bering. Also dragging a very weak front across the sea there, so maybe some snow showers eventually creeping their way into St. Paul and St. George, probably hovering over St. Lawrence Island as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. And this wave working its way from east to west across the western Gulf, creating some snow and rain across the region, probably grazing places like Sand Point, Cold Bay, and False Pass as we get into Tuesday and again your Wednesday. Let's take a look at temperatures. Here's a look at the morning for Christmas there. 20s and 30s for many in southeast. Again, you'll notice a big difference as that moisture moves in. Temperatures probably closing in on that 30-degree mark as that band gets a little bit closer to you. So Sitka showing here 33 degrees. Prince William Sound in the teens and 20s, down to the Kenai Peninsula in the 30s. Kodiak 33. Fort Yukon and Northway, some of the colder spots on the map tomorrow morning. 15 in Fort Yukon, 29 below in Northway there. Anywhere from 0 to about 10 above for the North Slope. Teens and 20s for Kotzebue Sound, low 20s for Norton Sound. St. Lawrence Island, about 24. St. Paul, 31, low 30s for most of the Alaska Peninsula and the chain. As you get into highs on Christmas Day, 6, for Fairbanks, 5 in Eagle, 14 around Golcana, or Delta, I should say, 6 for Golcana, and mid to upper 20s for most of the Glen Highway there, all the way toward Talkeetna on the Parks, 28 degrees there, 30 in Homer, 36 in Seward. In southeast, you're looking at 20s and 30s again for Christmas Day. Bristol Bay temps, fairly close to freezing most of the day, 28 in Nunivak Island. Nome, you're looking at 26. As we get into Tuesday morning, anywhere from 15 to 16 below from Fort Yukon to Northway Eagle, 6 below, 1 below in Fairbanks for the morning on Tuesday, 20s and 30s for southeast. Mid to upper 20s for south central. Southwest coast in the teens and 20s. Nome, you're looking at 18. Kotzebue, about 15. 5 in Barrow, and 7 for Kaktovik. High temperatures for Tuesday and back to work. Low to mid-teens for the north. The Middle Tanana Valley, single digits. South Central, mid to upper 20s. 34 in Kodiak. 30s for many in Southeast. And it looks like most in Southwest will be dealing with temperatures back in the lower to mid-20s as we go through your Tuesday. And 24 in Nome, 23 around Shishmaref, and about 21 there in Kotzebue for your Tuesday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather now, look for IFR conditions across Southwest up toward Nome. MVFR will be a little more widespread into Kotzebue Sound and parts of St. Lawrence Island, as well as areas down near Lake Iliamna. The western Alaska Range passes likely holding at IFR through a large part of the day, and IFR around the Chugach and Prince William Sound. Look for some of that to sneak into the Turnagain Arm. MVFR across the southern outer coast for southeast. Most of the inside passages look to be okay, and as we go through your Monday on Christmas Day afternoon, MVFR conditions around Sitka and into parts of Cross Sound. The northern Gulf with IFR still holding around Prince William Sound and parts of the Kenai Peninsula. Look for IFR west of the Alaska Range, but still holding over some of your favorite passes, stretching up toward Rainy Pass, Lake Clark and Merrill, and Lake Iliamna out toward the west, as some of that sneaking into the Yukon, as well as holding across the north and eastern parts of Norton Sound. MVFR conditions for parts of Adak and Atka at times into Kotzebue Sound and most of the Seward Peninsula and Kobuk valleys. As we get into Tuesday morning, IFR is going to be a little more widespread across the Kobuk and Noatak and into the Koyukuk and down into the lower and middle Yukon valleys, as well as areas holding just west of the Alaska Range into some of the northern passes by this point. For southeast, things look pretty good and clear. For south central, mostly south of Palmer and Wasilla. Talkeetna may be flirting with some poor visibility and ceilings at times. And the Aleutians, as well as Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula and the North Slope, should be okay for Tuesday morning. For Tuesday afternoon, MVFR spreads out a little bit more to the north and east. You can see that moving into places like Barrow, Prudhoe Bay, and Dead Horse, and into Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass. The upper Yukon and upper Tanana valleys start to see a little more IFR conditions. Southeast still looking good. Norton Sound, Nome, and into Unalakleet, as well as Yukon Delta, and again the western Alaska Range passes looking to hold under IFR with MVFR hit and miss out across the Bering Sea coast and still free and clear around Kodiak Island. Here's a look at your pass conditions now. For Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions for your Christmas Day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look to hold at IFR, and looks like we'll start at least at that point for your Tuesday morning. Rainy Pass starts at MVFR but leans over toward IFR conditions for your Monday. Windy Pass expected to start at VFR with a change over to MVFR as the day goes on. Expect similar conditions to be found in Isabel Pass. Mentasta Pass right now pretty cold. Make sure you check the altimeter there. VFR conditions are expected, but again, that high pressure system across the western Yukon is pretty high. Tanita Pass, VFR conditions to MVFR throughout the day. Portage Pass, we're going to call IFR. Most of that will be on the Prince William Sound side, but some of that could certainly sneak on through into the Turnagain Arm. Chilkoot and White Pass expected to see VFR, maybe a lean over toward MVFR, but this is going to be very isolated stuff. Most of Southeast will not suffer from that. Here's your freezing levels. We still have a bubble of warm air up across the North Slope. Levels as high as 6,000 feet right now. Meanwhile, the surface freezing line's way down south. You can see that nudging north of the Pribilovs and a 2,000-foot freezing line from the remnants of that last wave, still down around Vancouver Island and south of Haida Gwaii. Icing potential is going to be a little lower than it was yesterday and kind of turning into Swiss cheese, it looks like, across the central and southwestern part of the state. Anywhere from about 2,000 to 4,000 feet and above, about 5,000 feet for most of southeast. And for the central and southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians, you're looking at about 4,000 feet and above. Most of this will be isolated moderate. Didn't see a whole lot of reports coming in this morning. For Monday, high pressure up across the Beaufort Sea is still creating quite a ridge across the eastern part of Alaska and the Alcan. We've got a ridge building across the west coast. It's shifted a little bit more, but a decent trough still holding across the Bering Sea. And as this is gradually moving eastward, we're going to get back into some of that colder, drier weather, at least for a little while. There's still low pressure out here building, and another ridge means another surge of southerly winds on the back side of this. At 9,000 feet, you can see winds have diminished across most areas. We still have a lot of convergence here, winds coming together across the western Brooks Range, Kotzebue Sound, and at that point, winds have to speed up a little bit, and they do, up to 40 knots there. But most areas across Alaska, southeast, southwest, and the interior, all looking at generally light winds, about 10 to 25 knots in most cases. At 3,000 feet, we still have that Broad southerly flow working up the west coast, about 20 knots there with high pressure out across the Gulf of Alaska. Light winds converging across the north slope in this case, 25 to 40 knots, and northwesterlies across the central and western chain. So turbulence has greatly improved and really diminished over the last couple days. Generally below 4,000 feet is where we'll find some issues, maybe some bumps still around St. Lawrence Island, around the Aleutians, and also around Kodiak Island to perhaps just north and east of Sand Point. Most of the interior and southeast should be okay, but again, your trouble spots will be around St. Lawrence Island and perhaps some of the central and western chain. We'll be back with a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but,
Okay.
since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show.
Okay.
How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because
Okay.
the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a
No, that'd be a
creature,
bad day.
would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but's covered by snow,
Right.
a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice?
Oh.
All three of these are white.
Right.
The snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? Right. How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white.
Right.
And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there, but otherwise there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? Okay. It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit. See, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical, that at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. Visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savunga or Gamble and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there, visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
Okay. You know, I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, you know, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who are trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself. So you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Right? Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert, there's a great image of the same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska weather facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Here's a look at today's sea ice edge. Notice that the warm air continues to open up the waters in the Chukchi Sea and pushing ice that is a less concentration northward towards the southern coastlines there, Norton Sound and also Kotzebue Sound. So watch for some open areas on the south-facing or the north-facing coastlines there and the southern ends of both of the sounds there in Kotzebue and in Norton. As we take a look at winds across southeast, the wind's not terribly strong on the inside, 10 to 15 knots or so around southeast, 2 to 3 foot seas there for Christmas Day. More of a west to northwesterly flow across the outer coast, some higher seas offshore. We're looking for seas across the coast anywhere from 11 to 16 feet. Low pressure will kind of sag a little bit further southward and weaken as we get into Tuesday. Winds remain light on the outside. On the inside, though, they're picking up for the Lynn Canal up to 35 knots with a 7-foot sea on Tuesday. Northeasterlies up to 25 across Clarence Strait, 5 knots from the north and west, so only 2-foot seas. Looks like a good day there. And light winds across the outer coast on Tuesday. Monday, light winds inside of Prince William Sound, 2-foot seas for Christmas Day. Northerlies across Cook Inlet, 20 to 25, 6 to 7-foot seas there. South and southwesterlies across the outer coast for the northern Gulf. 11 to 12-foot seas expected there. And then light offshore breezes anywhere from 10 to 20 knots. 4-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, 2 to 5-foot seas around Cook Inlet, and 4 to 5-foot seas across the northern Gulf for your Tuesday. Around Bristol Bay, westerlies at 20 knots with a 7-foot sea, 6-foot seas and 25-knot winds inside of Shelikof Strait from the south and west. A west and southwesterly flow across the Alaska Peninsula's Pacific coastline. And southerlies down the Bering Sea coastline up to 7-foot seas there on Monday. North and easterly flow developing there and strengthening a little bit more across the Pacific coast, looking for 20 to 25-knot winds, 10 to 11-foot seas there across the Pacific. Small seas inside of Shelikof Strait and light winds as well, and 10 to 15-knot winds for the Bering Strait. Bering Sea, 3 to 7-foot seas are expected there as we go through your Tuesday. For the Aleutians, stronger winds and higher seas because remember we've had those several waves of low pressure. You'll see those again on the map here in just a minute. They're not very strong, but they're just enough to kind of stir stuff up. 11 to 16-foot seas expected across the Bering Sea. Coastline there, 14-foot seas extend all the way out toward Kiska with 40-knot winds and 30 to 40-knot winds across the Pacific coastline as well. 10 to 15-foot seas there with a light southeasterly flow coming in through Unalaska and Nikolsky on Christmas Day. Wind should diminish on Tuesday. Look for a broad easterly flow feeding back into the next weather maker there. Is about 10 to 20 knot winds there, but overall fairly light considering what you've seen. 4 to 8 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast, anywhere from 5 to 11 foot seas across the Pacific. And then once again, the winds are strengthening out across the western regions into the next storm. You'll see that again on the map, just barely, 40 knots with a 22-foot sea on Tuesday. For the west coast, light onshore flow into Norton Sound, into the YK Delta, down to the Kuskokwim Delta, 15 to 20 knot winds, and southeasterlies into St. Matthew and St. Paul, St. George, anywhere from 10 to 15 knots, 7 to 10-foot seas there. By Tuesday, southerlies into St. Lawrence Island, northeasterlies are light in Norton Sound and off the YK Delta coastline. Easterlies a little bit stronger for St. Paul and St. George with a 9-foot sea, 8-foot seas around St. Matthew, and 25-knot winds on Tuesday. For the north slope, southeasterly winds are picking up now as high pressure is trying to build in. That gradient's tightening up. Look for a 30-knot wind around Kaktovik and offshore there. South and easterly flow across the Beaufort Seacoast. Northeasterly is light between Barrow and Point Lay, and then they pick up from the south coming out of Kotzebue Sound, 10 to 20 knots with a 3 to 4 foot sea there, and 9-foot seas north of St. Lawrence Island, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea into the Bering Strait. As we get into Tuesday, the southerly flow continues into the Chukchi Sea, 15 to 20 knots there with 4 to 7-foot seas, and westerlies over the ice, 15 knots over the Beaufort Sea. Let's recap tonight's weather on this Christmas Eve. You'll notice some chances for light snow from Sitka down toward Ketchikan. Some of that may drift a little bit further northward toward Juneau as we head into your Monday, Christmas Day. Across the west, areas of light snow and snow showers generally for the YK Delta all the way up toward the Bering Strait region and parts of the Alaska Range. A wind advisory is in effect for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, specifically Delta Junction. You might have some gusts up to 30 to 35 knots. And around the Eagle area, you might have some stronger winds as well. So hold on to your hats through tomorrow afternoon. A weak area of low pressure is working through the central chain. As we saw just moments ago, it may be just enough to stir up the winds and the seas a little bit. Areas of light snow across the west coast, and by Tuesday, high pressure starting to build in. Breezier conditions there for the Lynn Canal, especially in the northern parts of southeast, and snow showers and high pressure building in across the west. Merry Christmas. See you right here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.